need to. So thanks for everyone for being on the meeting. Again, my name's Garrison. I am the girls program director at Extreme Altitude. I do a lot more than just our girls program, but that's what my title is. So I oversee our preschool program, which also has kind of an assistant manager for our girls Gym Stars recreational program, our girls X League, our girls accelerated team program, which also has a head coach, the CU Boulder club gymnastics team, and the Rocky Mountain Mavericks men's gymnastics team. So that's everything that's in my umbrella here at Extreme Altitude. But I honestly probably spend most of my time with the X League program. I just think it's really cool. It's kind of revolutionized competitive gymnastics. It's something that I've never seen anywhere across the country before coming to Extreme Altitude. So it's one of my favorite things. So that's why I delegate other things to other people. So this meeting, I'll go into a couple things. I want to keep my part of the meeting as short as possible because one of the best things we can do is just kind of open discussion where people can ask questions or veteran parents can provide advice to new parents and so on. So, sound good? All right. If you're on the Zoom or if you're here in person and you have a question at any time, feel free to try to get my attention, unmute yourself, and just speak up. If you have nothing to say, just try to stay muted. I also have the chat window open, so if you guys do put something in the chat, I will see it. Or if you're here in person, I will do my best to remember to repeat the question so that everyone on Zoom can hear it also. So, first thing I want to go over, the email I sent out, there's a couple important items of information in there. The contract for this competition season. If you're new to X League, every season there's a contract affiliated with it. That's just basically you guys are agreeing to the commitment of being a part in the X League. And part of that is financial commitment as well. So, you know, if you can't do it, this is your time to choose something else. But hopefully you guys are all good and you'll have it. It also has the dates of our events associated with this season, which is a clinic as well as 3 competitions. And then in the handbook, or sorry, in the contract, it has all the costs, payment methods you guys can select, how the costs break down and what they're applied to, and then just, again, general policies like our handbook and our child abuse prevention policies that you guys agree to on your accounts when you sign our waivers and policies with your accounts, okay? Oh, she can barely hear me. Okay. If I sit down, can you hear me better if I'm a little bit closer, Holly? No. She said I can hear clearly. All right, we got other people that can hear clearly, so I don't know. It doesn't sound like it's my device, but I'll do my best. So. All right. So that's what's in the email. Before we get into the details on that, I just have a couple things. So my first thing I like to go over is the purpose and mission of the X League program. So we want to develop essentially quality life skills amongst children through our love of gymnastics. Everyone involved here is a passion-driven career. Most of us have formal educations in other things, but gymnastics was just something that was so important in our lives that we didn't want to stay away from it, and it brings us back in. And it's really all about how it can develop quality life skills and morals and ethics amongst children, and we want to share that love with people. So that's really what drives us as a business and a staff. The nice thing about X League is it allows us to offer the competitive side of gymnastics earlier in a gymnast progressions, as well as for reduced time and financial commitment compared to the normal. So in order to be competitive within the USA Gymnastics realm, which is the largest governing body for gymnastics in the country, gymnasts are being plucked out at super young ages, being forced to be single sport athletes, training 10 to 20 hours a week before they're 12 years old, you know, and it's very cutthroat. And there is a place for that, and we do that as well, but we wanted to make sure that wasn't the only place because it was really limiting the opportunity to a lot of people. So we wanted to provide something that requires less training time to be competitive. We actually restrict the amount of training that's allowed at each level so that the competitive playing field is fair. So if we had golds that trained 6 hours here and competed USA Gymnastics, another gym might make their golds trade 15 hours a week. and they'll be substantially better. And then it's not really a level playing field. It's also a lot cheaper to do because we do it all in-house versus extra costs that are affiliated with doing it with other gyms that are outside of our umbrella of facilities. And like I said, they can compete sooner. So a lot of times at high levels, it takes a really long time for a gymnast to get to the competitive side of the sport. And what we were experiencing is a lot of burnout in gymnastics before they ever reached it, versus being able to introduce it sooner, like other sports where, hey, I signed up for soccer, we went to 2 practices, and I had a game on Saturday, right? So that's kind of the meaning behind it. This other few philosophies don't only apply to X League, but it's not about winning or losing, okay? We feel that gymnastics is about enjoying the journey regardless of the destination. So sure, there is a destination in sight, but we're really just focused on the steps we take to get there, and are we enjoying the process to get there? And when we hit the end of our journey in gymnastics, do we look back on the experience positively? So whether you graduate high school doing it, whether you stop doing it at 12, whether you do it for the rest of your life, did you enjoy your experience, and did it impact your life in a positive way? So that is my purpose and mission, or our purpose and mission of the X League. A couple general philosophies of gymnastics that we install on our staff here and that we follow are kind of little brief sayings that sum it up. So one is gymnastics is a marathon, not a sprint. So in gymnastics, fast is slow is fast. Developing fast and like just chucking tricks means you'll actually develop slowly in the long term. But if you take the time to develop technique and foundations and strength and conditioning and flexibility, you'll develop faster in the end. And that's where we say it's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a long time to develop. It takes a lot of reps. Nothing happens instantly. Again, I like that X League is low commitment. So we want to offer this opportunity with as low commitment as possible. And then I have just kind of a saying. So I have 2 important sayings, and I will say this directly to all athletes I ever work with. So one, I'm big on respect. And in gymnastics, I use 3 R's. There are 3 things that I want people to be respectful at all times. One would be all of the staff affiliated with gymnastics in general, whether it's their coach, the office manager, other coaches from other teams. And I would even extend that to like the parents and the families involved also, okay? I want everyone to be respectful of each other. Gymnasts should be respectful of not only themselves, but every single other gymnast they ever incorporate with. And they don't have to like each other to be good teammates, right? But we expect everyone to be a good teammate, and we expect everyone to be respectful of other gymnasts. And then we want everyone to be respectful of the facility. So, we like to have gymnasts help with setting up stations or cleaning up the gym at the end of their practice, because we feel that's an important part of taking pride and ownership in what they do here versus just maybe taking advantage of it. The other saying I always say is, my expectation of all people involved is that they represent themselves, their teammates, in extreme altitude in a positive manner at all times. And even when I coached my own X League team, those were the 2 phrases I said to my athletes. And I said, if you have an issue with any of those things at any time, I will dismiss you immediately from practice or competition, whatever they're doing. So I like very simple key statements that everything can be summed up to. And really, it's just about positive interactions with other people is kind of the bottom line. So a couple other things with gymnastics. So what may seem simple or unnoticeable, like small improvements to the untrained eye, can actually be huge accomplishments. I'm known for this as a coach personally. I might be screaming my head off for something that just seems so minor, even to the gymnast, but it's so monumental in gymnastics. Everyone progresses in their own way and at their own pace. So we try to customize the experience to the individual as much as possible, and people will not progress, similar to each other necessarily. And that includes a lot of different things. Even an individual might progress really fast for some years and really slow for other years, because there's so many factors that are contributed to progress and success in gymnastics that are outside of even what they do in the gym, like growth, for example. And then finally, like I just said, progression is not at a constant rate. Progression will ebb and flow. A common thing we say in gymnastics is 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still 1 step forward. And that's really common in gymnastics training. You take 2 steps forward, but then you got to go a step back and reassure what happened before and keep taking 2 steps forward. I kind of call it the upward spiral of progress. So the final thing I like to say about gymnastics is the hardest sport in the world. It's scary. It's terrifying. It'll make you better at all other sports, but no other sport will make you better at gymnastics. And one of the reasons I say it's the hardest sport in the world is because over 90% of their experience will be failure. You rarely succeed in gymnastics. And by design, that's why we have these big crash mats and foam pits, is because they are going to do it wrong and fail and fall almost all the time. And that type of resilience it teaches is really important, but it's also very hard. So it's why we want to, make sure that everyone knows that that's just part of the process. And really, you're failing all the time just so that hopefully you succeed for one single 30-second routine at a competition, right? It seems like a lot of work for a little bit. So, next item of topic is just, I'm really big on sportsmanship and in competition. I think competition is really fun, and I think it's a way that people can connect with one another. So I just have one small statement, which is win with class and lose with grace. So what I like to say to athletes at competition is they should be cheering for and supporting every other competing athlete the whole time. Because if that athlete wasn't here, it would just be another practice. There would be no meaning to what you were doing that day. So we want everyone to win with class. So if they won, they should be proud of themselves, but they shouldn't be, putting other people down, because other people tried really hard as well. And by winning, they show that, hey, their effort is being rewarded and they deserve to be up there. And with lose with grace, it has to do with, hey, if you tried your hardest and someone beat you, that's okay. Because you should praise them for doing so well, because you worked just as hard and they took a step ahead of you this time, and now you have something to chase, and that's only going to make you better. So win with class, lose with grace. All right, that is my philosophy section. Anything to bring up before I move on to more formal information that we're not going to go in super detail on?
Don't know.
Cool. All right. So expectations of parents and families involved with the X League. Again, most of it is the philosophy I have with gymnastics extends to everyone involved. I don't see a team as just the gymnasts or just the gymnasts and the coaches. It takes an army just to have one gymnast. It takes siblings that are willing to get rides from people. It takes parents and grandparents and uncles and all this stuff and traveling. It takes a lot just for a gymnast to enjoy their experience. So I would say all my philosophies extend to all the families. I really love team spirit. I love going nuts at competition. So I would love for parents in the crowd, cheer loud, go crazy, bring big heads of your kid's face, like dress up like your team name, all that stuff. I think it's really important. And I think it's something that lacks in a lot of gymnastics across the country, which baffles me, because at the highest level, which is collegiate gymnastics, that is the standard. It's so loud with team spirit that you can't hear the person sitting next to you when they talk to you. So I would extend an invitation to all of you guys to be crazy like that, as long as it's in a respectful way. We don't want to do anything that's demeaning to others or hinders other people's performance in any way. Other important thing I just want to mention is we're all on the same team. Everyone here at Extreme Altitude, the goal is for each gymnast to be the best they can be. And it's not just what the coach and gymnast does, right? We're all on the same team, parents and coaches, parents and staff. So if you guys need help with anything, let us know. We might ask you to help with things and so on, but we all want the same thing. We just want a great experience for all the athletes and for them to be the best they can be. So that philosophy will drive every decision. And then finally, I just want to remind everyone with pickup and drop off, we've been pretty good lately, but when I first started here, there's a lot of issues with athletes, not necessarily in the X League, but young athletes going outside at night and waiting there. And we thought they were being picked up. And then we find out 30 minutes later, they're just sitting outside in the dark. So please, if your athletes are young, come indoors. Or if your athletes have a personal device like a watch or a phone or something like that, then I think it's appropriate to just message them saying, hey, I'm outside ready for pickup. But we just please remind your athletes, don't be hanging out outside. We want everyone to be safe. And until we witness them in your care and your supervision, we are responsible for their safety, and we want to prevent any holes in that transition. So. All right, that's my expectations of parents. So next thing, I'm going to talk a little bit about our child abuse prevention policy. So we refer to it as our CAP policy. This is very important in gymnastics and very important in our business. So I'm just going to go over a couple things, but all extreme altitude coaches and staff members are what are called mandated reporters of any form of child abuse, whether it be mental, physical, or sexual. That can include athlete to athlete. It can include adult to athlete. It can include adult to adult. So we are mandated reporters. We are also mandated to not perform any sort of internal investigation. If we have any signs of abuse, we are trained to identify those signs and immediately report it to the proper authorities, which could be two entities. It could be the police, or it could be what is called the Safe Sport Organization, which is a national organization that's all about preventing child abuse in sports. And most of our coaches are also Safe Sport trained. All of the ex-league coaches are through the USA Gymnastics and Safe Sport organization. So we are trained to identify signs of abuse and mandated to report it in any way. And I ask everyone to take on that responsibility also. No matter who it is, try to keep an eye out for grooming behaviors or any signs of abuse. So a couple other things is just staff members and athletes should never have private one-on-one contact, whether it be in person or digitally on things like Facebook or texting or email, etc. All communication must go with the parent. Any communication outside of just practice that goes directly coach to athlete, the parent needs to be involved with. None of their athletes in Exley are old enough where they're like texting their coaches, but if they are, or they're messaging them on Instagram or things like that, that is not allowed. Please let us know. Please let your children know not to be doing those things unless you're involved directly. And also all activities should be 100% observable and interruptible. So if you're doing a private lesson with a gymnast, that's totally fine. That's one-on-one in the gym, but it is expected that the parent stays in earshot and eyesight of the whole thing. So it is observable and interruptible at all times, unless there's another certified adult that's in the facility as well. So, we do have separate clothing and changing rooms and bathrooms for staff and for athletes. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure we're doing. We have a zero tolerance policy with any sort of bullying, hazing, or harassment amongst athletes. That is probably my number one most important thing that I ever think I would address. And again, any sort of disrespectful behavior amongst people could be call for immediate dismissal from our program. So sometimes, gymnastics requires physical contact like spotting. When that's the case, our coaches are trained to try to make sure that the athlete is comfortable with that before just going in. And when that happens, there is incidences where falls or preventing injury or things like that, inappropriate contact can be made. We do train coaches to make sure to address it and apologize immediately with the athlete. And then that way the athlete should know, hey, if they're uncomfortable, they can report it to someone they're comfortable with. And every athlete has the right to refuse contact. So if any of the athletes are really uncomfortable, feel free to tell them that no, they would prefer not to do it. It just comes a little bit more creative and difficult way to teach gymnastics, which is fine. So there's travel guidelines in this. We don't really ever travel that much, so I'm not going to go into detail with that. And then the photographic and video images. So photo and video review is a very useful tool in gymnastics, but coaches should not be doing it on any of their personal devices, or if they only have a personal device, it must be immediately deleted and removed from the device. So, our coaches don't have their phones out on the floor really ever, so they're not doing any of that. And if we do any sort of photo or video review, we use staff business-owned devices. So. And then finally, on the last page of this, I sent it out. It is like an agreement. Essentially, you guys, if you don't have to hand this in and sign it, but it's a part of the policies and procedures that you agree to in your online account. And it's briefly touched on in the contract for the season. Any questions on that or comments?
Hey, this is Nasim, Zoe's mom.
Yep.
Has the gym ever had an instance where there has been the need to report any cap related issues?
Personally, in my time here, we have not had any issues internally at extreme altitude, though I know there are staff and management at extreme altitude that have reported in the past. I don't think they were necessarily at extreme altitude. I think it was people at other facilities. I'm just not sure. So I've been here since August of 2022, and there has been no incidences since then. So
Thank you.
cool. The other thing that's in the email is a copy of the handbook. Again, I kind of went over the main things I want in this. I'm not going to go in detail. So if you guys want to learn more about our handbook that we give to all of our competitive groups, feel free to read that in more detail. All right. I'm going to go over the contract a little bit. So the contract is in the form of an online form that you fill out. You will be required to fill this out in order to participate in the spring 2024 competition season, and it is due next Thursday. So you have one full week to review it and decide. A couple of important things on there that I haven't mentioned already. It tells you what the competition commitment is, which is essentially our spring session, March, April, and May. It tells you the dates of the competition and the locations they're at, as well as the date and time of the clinic. The clinic is essentially a really fancy, cool practice that we invite all the X-League athletes to. So they get to be grouped with athletes they don't necessarily train with regularly, and they'll work with coaches that they don't necessarily train with regularly. And then the next part of the contract, it gives you a yes or no to select what meets you will attend. So if there's a weekend you guys can't attend, no big deal. We understand people plan out travel. You might have things planned before the meet. Things might come up. That's totally fine. If you select no and change your mind, it's not, there is an option to try to get into the meet, but there's no guarantees. A lot of the competitions get so full that we can't add people later on after it's planned. And if you say yes, and then you can't go in the end, there's no guarantees of getting any sort of financial refund back for that competition. Again, we will always try to, but I'm not in control of that. So there's no guarantee. So basically anything that I'm not in control of deciding for, I try to interpret the policy or procedures in the way that will benefit you guys the most. So I try to be an advocate for all of you in any situation that I am not the decision maker. It goes into installments and payment plans. So you can essentially decide to pay for the whole season upfront with one payment, which would be on March 15th, or you could do it in 3 payments, which would be March 15th, April 15th, and May 15th. And then there's also a breakdown of the different fees. So there's, team support fee, the cost of the clinic, meet entry fees, coaches compensations, etc. So essentially the whole season will total, I think it's supposed to say 610, not 590, if we do the quick math, but essentially about $600 total for the whole season. And then uniforms are separate. So the uniform is unique to every season. It's unique to every team. There's 2 items that are required for every athlete to purchase, which are the leotard and the team shirt. And then there's optional items that's up to you and your athlete if you want them, which are tight-fitted gymnastic shorts, which can be worn in training and competition, as well as capri-style leggings, which can be worn in training and competition, and a bag. So gymnasts are required to go to a competition with a bag, but any bag is fine. You don't have to buy our bag. A drawstring bag is fine. A Walmart grocery bag is fine. Whatever, a backpack they have, any sort of bag is fine, just to keep their personal belongings in. So, but those are all the items. Basically, the leotard, we typically, for bronze, it's for $45, silver, $55, gold, $65, because we try to get a little, kind of upgrade the style of the leotard with the levels. And then the t-shirt, I think, is $25. So, yeah, I think it's that. Sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't memorize things. I write them down and look them up. So, so that's just to give you an idea of what the uniforms could cost and what you guys would need. And they're pretty cool. Once you guys have the leotard, we ask that the gymnasts don't wear it during practice until after their first competition. But once they wear it in their first competition, they can wear the leotard as many times as they want. And honestly, it's a pretty good deal. You guys are usually getting really nice leotards that on the GK website are like $68, and we're only charging $45. So it's a good way to get constant stock of leotards for your gymnasts that they can keep wearing. And if they grow out of them, feel free to try to connect with other X-League parents and see if you can do some sort of hand-me-down process. So. All right, that is everything in the contract that I wanted to say. Like I said, we would like it handed in by basically close of business next Thursday, the 29th, which is about 8 p.m. Because then on Friday the 1st, we're going to send you guys another form that has to do with the uniforms, and you can select items that you want, and you can pre-select sizes, or you can select to come in person and have your athlete sized by one of our staff members so they can tell you what size would be best.
So the leotard that they had for the last competition is not going to be used for the next one?
Correct. If your team ends up doing the same design leotard that a gymnast already has, you don't have to rebuy the leotard. So if you already have that one, for example, you can use it. But no, we do a new leotard and a new t-shirt every season. So this year, the team names are going to be pirate themed. So, yeah.
So there's a spring season. Is there a summer season and a fall season as well?
Good question. So we had a question, if we're in the spring season, what are other seasons? Is there a fall season? Is there a summer season? So on. So we do 2 X-League competition seasons a year. The spring season, which is 3 competitions that run between March, April, and May. And then we do a fall season, which is 3 competitions that run September, October, November. Jessica, now's a good time to ask if you want to unmute and ask, or just type it in the chat.
Yeah, great. So I might be ahead of myself before reading the contract, so I apologize, and you can just reference me to the contract if so. But you had mentioned giving our dates of the competitions we would like to sign up for or be available for. And then you had made a comment that if you go ahead and say, I'm available for such and such a date, and then you change your mind, there may not be a refund. If you say that you're only attending certain dates, do you just pay for what you are signing up for? Because my previous interpretation of it was that you pay for all the competitions, and if you can't make it, you can't make it. There's not a refund process.
Yeah, good question. So there are some expenses that you must pay in full, regardless of if you are attending the competition or not. If you fill out this contract and you say no to any of the competitions, the part that you will not be charged is called the meet entry fee. So the meet entry fees total for all 3 is $200. So 200 divided by 3 is the amount that you wouldn't be charged for any meets that you don't sign up for ahead of time. So by filling out this contract and saying no. But all the other expenses, they don't change for us as a business, whether you're there or not. So that's why those ones do not change. So what's that? $60 something per session is the meet entry fee. So that's where you wouldn't be charged it. If you say no to any of the meets and you pick multiple installments, so if you pick the 3 payment method, you'll pay the full installments on the first and second, and any proration or refunds or anything that happened, they'll always be reflected on the 3rd payment. So if you pick the 3 payment method, but you're only going to 2 meets, it'll be $197 on March 15th, $196 or $197 on April 15th, and then it'll be we'll subtract the $65-ish on the last payment. If you can only attend one of the 3 meets, we might just kind of reach out to you and be like, hey, what's going on? You know, is this still appropriate? But it happens because people are like, yep, we already planned all our vacations and all this stuff. And so it doesn't line up. That's totally fine. If you're unable to attend all 3 meets, we would probably say, hey, we don't think X League is the right fit for you. So maybe we want to look at our GymStars 3 program or something like that, which it can continue development without the competition. And you can always try to switch back and forth.
And will all X League athletes be allowed or permitted to go into all the meets as long as parents sign up, or are they selected, or?
Nope, everyone will go. Everyone will compete all 4 events. The only exception to a gymnast competing all 4 events if there's some sort of safety reason that they can't do it. So, for example, a gymnast broke her foot. She came back to competition, but she was only capable of doing beam and bars, but floor and vault were too much on her foot per the doctor's recommendation, so she only competed 2 events. The only other thing would be if it's like a gymnast doesn't have the requirements of that level, and so it's unsafe for them to perform, we wouldn't have them compete that event. But in order to move up to that level, you have to already have the requirements. So we shouldn't really ever be in that position.
So another real quick question, if you don't mind me interjecting.
Yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, sorry. I think I already got my answer to this, but I just wanted to confirm. So the $590, that is a one-time payment. It's not a per meet payment, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So the 590, and again, if someone has a calculator and wants to add these up, I think it's actually 610. But I will edit that before this gets sent out. That is total for the whole season, and it's separate from tuition. So tuition continues normal on the first of every month, and then the 610 is the total amount for the entire season.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So if you pick the 3 payment method, it would be that divided by 3. If you pay it all in full one time on March 15th, that's the only payment you make for the whole season.
Thank you.
On the competition weekends that you already have listed out, like, you know, April 19th through the 21st being the first example, is it just gonna be one day that we compete, or do we compete all 3 of those days?
Yes, I was waiting for this one. So good question. Every gymnast within that weekend will compete in a single session that lasts from 2 to 3 hours, depending on the number of gymnasts that are in it. Okay. So it's not the whole weekend. A gymnast doesn't compete on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So for example, it might say April 20th to the 21st because the competition will last all weekend long. But about 3 weeks out from the competition, we'll send an official schedule out of when each gymnast and team is competing. And so it'll say, okay, the Rockin' Eye Patches, or the bronze team with Coach Megan, they will compete on Sunday from 8 to 10 a.m. And that usually, it comes out like 2 or 3 weeks before the competition.
I'm just curious about, like, so this contract we're signing is through this spring. What does summer look like?
Yeah.
If you like assume you'll do it in the fall, do you have to do it in the summer to be on the team again in the fall?
Yeah, so the question was about summer enrollment. So are you all aware of our basically recreational session commitments here? So if you sign up anytime in March, April, and May, you're committed March, April, May. And then the session ends, and the summer session is June and July. Then it goes fall session A is August, September. Fall session B is October, November. Winter session is December, January, February. Spring session is March, April, May. So we do those session commitments with enrollment. With X League, if you guys are taking the summer off, things like that, that's totally fine. We want to try to be as flexible as possible. The risk is, as the number of X League athletes we have go up, we can't save a spot during the summer. So if a gymnast is a silver and decides, hey, I don't want to do gymnastics in June and July, I want to come back in August, there's no guarantee that that spot will remain open until August. Other gymnasts might move into that group. So that's the risk. If you guys are trying to make decisions, we can talk about numbers and just, I can't tell you what to do. I can't predict the future, but I can try to give you an educated guess and as much information as I can to provide, you the opportunity to make a good decision. If a gymnast does take time off between seasons, we will not allow them to move up. So if spring season ends and we say, hey, you're a bronze, we want to invite you to move up to silver, and they say, well, we're taking the summer off, we'll require the gymnast to come back to the bronze level, and then they can try to move up again after the fall season. that's, but just as much information as we can for you guys to make decisions. The other thing we'll do in the summer is X League will have unlimited makeups in the summer. So we have bronzes and silvers that practice Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So if you're one of those levels, you can come to any of, like, if you miss a whole week for vacation, well, next week you can just come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if you wanted to. Just try to communicate that as much as we can. What we did last year is I essentially just staffed it enough to maintain if every gymnast showed up or if no gymnast showed up. And I like to do that in the summer for the X League families. With the golds, we would try to have them do makeup during silver practices probably. So, because there's no alternative gold schedule.
So are you going to add extra levels to X League as you mentioned before?
Yeah, so the question was, will X League ever have more levels beyond gold? And the answer is yes, the vision is to do that. We have 2 potential levels that would go beyond gold. Platinum is the next level, but we would actually make kind of a modified platinum because there are some things in the rule that are just such an insane jump from gold to platinum that it doesn't really make sense. And because this is our league, we like to change rules we don't like. The other idea is after platinum, we would do what we call a team cup format. So what I mean by that is if your gymnast was on a high school team here in Colorado or on a college team, or the way team awards work in competition is, so like in high school, for example, coaches are allowed to put up the 6 best routines on each event and you count the top 5 scores. Okay. So it's way more common for gymnasts to be event specialists. And it really plays it awesome because a gymnast might be 15, 16 years old and really bad at bars. And so they're like a silver on bars, but they're super good at floor and they're like a platinum on floor, right? They can be an event specialist and compete and contribute for the team without it being kind of a negative competitive experience. So that's the long-term vision of X League. Pretty much it'll happen when we have athletes that'll accommodate. So when athletes are at that level, we'll create that level. And that's kind of what we're trying to push towards. It maybe wouldn't be 6 up, 5 count. It might be 4 up, 3 count or something like that. But the idea is instead of all gymnasts competing in the all around, a team and a coach will strategize to put up the 3 or 4 best routines on each event. And then gymnasts can still train all 4 events, but hey, I'm really awesome at vault and I hate beam. They can just do vault and not do beam. So that's kind of the long-term vision that we'd like to see in the X League.
Are the timing for the X League classes the same over the summer and next fall, or do they change?
They pretty much remain the same. We might change them slightly, but they're pretty much the same. One of the things we typically do also is we try not to have any practices past 3 p.m. on Friday. So the golds, for example, would have practice maybe Monday instead of Friday night. That way Friday evenings are free in the summer. Again, it's no guarantee. It kind of depends on how we make the schedule, but from past years and experience, we always manage to accommodate that. So like I won't change Monday, Wednesday to Tuesday, Thursday, for example. And the time blocks typically stay the same. We put the lower level athletes earlier and the higher level athletes later.
And one more question, and sorry if this is a little ignorant. Is the X League sort of system, is that something unique to extreme altitude, unique to Colorado, or is that a national thing?
Yeah, okay. So in the X League, we use the competitive rules created by USA Gymnastics. That is called the Excel program. So if you search, I'll type it in the chat, but XCEL Gymnastics, USA Gymnastics, right? You can learn more about what the Excel program is. That's what our like higher level competitive girls team does, where they represent extreme altitude and they compete all across the state, region, and country against other gyms like extreme altitude. So we use the same rule system, but we change things we don't like about it. So for example, we reduce the amount of practice time and restrict it amongst the league. Or if there's a lot of like big restrictions in USA Gymnastics with like permanent bracelets and how many earrings you're allowed to wear and all this stuff. What are you allowed to wear? And you know, what undergarments you're allowed to wear. So if it's not a safety hazard, we try to instruct the judges to ignore those rules because we're like, why? If it's not putting the gymnast at a risk from a safety standpoint, why do these rules exist? So that's kind of the difference. I had one more thing I was going with that, but
She's asking like.
Oh, yes. okay. So the X League is in-house. Okay, so Extreme Altitude is actually one of a family of gymnastics businesses that are all owned by the same people. And which is a company called Elevation Gymnation, which doesn't really pertain to you guys at all. But Extreme Altitude here in Lafayette, Timberline Gymnastics in Fort Collins, Timberline Gymnastics in Windsor, as well as a gym out in California are all owned by the same person and are run by the same parent umbrella company. And so the X League is something that we created internally at Extreme Altitude, and now every facility does their own thing. So the gym out in California, they call it the A League because the name of their gym starts with the letter A. So it is not something that is common. It is unique to Extreme. And as I said, before meeting the people at Extreme, I have never seen another gym create an intramural gymnastics league ever in my life. So it's basically adding competition to recreational gymnastics. And it's really cool because, like I said, at the USAG competitive level, it was too common of burnout, negative cultural experiences, and gymnasts at like 9, 10 years old having to sign their life away, and not be able to be a kid. So we try not to do that unless like the gymnast really, is at that level and is mature enough to decide that for themselves. So,
That's great. Thanks.
our X League, particularly Extreme Altitude, we will compete at Timberline in Windsor one time, at Timberline in Fort Collins, and then at Extreme Altitude. And each one of the facilities has multiple teams of each level. So at Extreme Altitude, we have 4 different bronze teams that go up to 8 to 10 athletes per team and each have a head coach. And then at Timberline Fort Collins, they have another 3. And then at Timberline Windsor, they have another 3. And so they'll all compete against each other as bronzes. It might get to the point where X League is so large, there needs to be a North X League and a South X League. And then at a certain level, there's like a Premier X League. I don't know, right? But we're getting to the point where X League's getting pretty big with the 3 facilities. So. Good.
My question from earlier was, is the gymnastics camp July 8th through the 12th? Is that an optional, or is that kind of encouraged or expected for the X League bronze or
Yeah.
whatever X League members?
Yeah, it's encouraged because it's awesome, but it's not mandatory. We haven't set up the camp yet. We haven't done any enrollment. Basically, you guys will get communication at some point where you'll just say, I want to attend the camp, yes or no. If you say no, no strings attached, you won't be charged, all that stuff. And if you say yes, we'll enroll you in the camp and we'll put the charge. And basically with the way camps work is there's a $50 deposit the day of enrollment, and then you pay for the full camp the first day of the camp.
I remember once I was charged without telling, so if you don't say no, they would just assume you're coming. So
Well, that's how we did it last year. I don't
Yeah,
know if we're
always
doing it exactly the
changing,
same.
That happened.
I mean, yeah, we'll see how it goes. So with the way we did it last year, we had a parent here. It was you were automatically enrolled unless you told us otherwise. But if that's the way we do it this year, we will communicate that very clearly in email that says you're signed up for the camp unless you tell us no. So we haven't done the planning yet other than making sure everyone knew the dates. So I don't know that procedure will be done that way again. So.
And then a follow-up question with that is, if you participate in camp, I assume you're not attending the evening, the traditional evening classes for that week.
Actually, so what we typically do is the camp is a full day camp from 9 a.m. to 3:30, and kids have to pack a lunch. There will be a lunch break and there'll be 2 snack breaks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And you'll attend the camps the day you don't have evening practice, and then attend evening practice the days you don't have camp. So for example, if I practice Monday, Wednesday, I will go to camp Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. The only exception to that is with the Golds, because they practice 3 days a week. We'll cancel one of their days, so they're still attending 3 days, one of their evenings, so they're still attending 3 days of camp. And the tuition for that month will be prorated based on that cancellation. If you guys are interested in alternative methods of that, feel free to shoot me an email and be like, we'd prefer just to do all 5 days and no practices. If everyone said that, then I might just, change how we do it. I don't know. But our coaches that would run the X League camp also still have to coach classes in the evening.
So if you're attending class on Monday, Wednesday, you would attend camp only Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Correct. And again, that's just, we've done it that way in the past because in the past, that's what's worked best for the people involved. So if that changes, we'll change. Good questions.
So there's like 4 bronze level teams at Extreme. Are you also competing against those teams? Or are you all on one team?
Nope. Yeah, good question. So the question was, if there's 4 different bronze teams at Extreme, do they combine into one team at competition, or are they 4 separate teams? They're always 4 separate teams. So, for example, what were our names last year? Candy and stuff. So it was the Saucy Strawberries were Megan's team, and they went against the Bouncing Blueberries, which were Camille's team, and the Glorious Grapes, which were Megan's team. Right. And so those are 3 teams all at extreme altitude that train independent of one another. I mean, they interact. We usually do warm up together. They'll learn dance routines together and things like that. But they'll compete against each other as well as the other bronze teams. And then the way teams work is it's the top 3 scores on each event go towards the team score. And that's how the team score is calculated. And then for individual awards, so there's individual awards on all 4 events, plus the all around, which is the combination of all 4 events. Those will be based on age. So it'll be broken up into 3 or 4 age groups, depending on the number of athletes. And there's it's not like 6 to 7-year-olds. The way that age groups are broken up are based on the ages of the athletes. So basically the youngest third of the athletes are broken into one age group, and then the middle is broken up into an age group, and then the third oldest is broken up into their own age group. So the only weird thing about that is it doesn't really happen in X League because you compete against the same people every meet, but a gymnast could switch age groups if they're kind of on the line, if one meet has a bunch of young kids and then a different meet has a bunch of old kids. But that doesn't really happen in X League because it's all the same teams. So. I got some good, if we don't have other official questions or stuff like that, what I usually do is I try to go into a little bit basic information of rules of gymnastics and what are you watching at competition. I try to attend a lot of the competitions, and I love to just stand in the parent area so people can just ask like, wait, what is that? What does that mean? What does that number mean? And so on. But I have some basic gymnastics rules, gymnastics 101 for parents, if we don't have any other official questions. Cool. All right. So I'm going to give you the whole spiel. So what we do here at extreme altitude is called artistic gymnastics. So there's multiple disciplines of gymnastics. We are specifically doing artistic gymnastics. And if you are doing the events vault, bars, beam, and floor, it's called women's artistic gymnastics. Men's artistic gymnastics does 6 events, and they're totally different. Okay, so we're doing women's artistic gymnastics. And a fun thing I like to do with kids is I go, what's the name of the sport? And they all say gymnastics. And I say, no, that's wrong. It's women's artistic gymnastics. And I like to teach them that because the women's part means you're doing vault, bars, beam, and floor. The artistic part means what we do is judged based on the quality of it, based on the style and the artistry of how we do it. And then the gymnastics is the flipping and the tricking. And what I say is gymnastics is actually a perfect balance of strength, flexibility, and technique. So those are the 3 corners of the triangle that makes up gymnastics. Okay. The next tier, okay, is there's an organization called the Federation of International Gymnastics. That is an international organization that standardizes gymnastics across all countries. They're the ones that make the rules that are implemented at the Olympics, for example. Then in the US, there's multiple national governing bodies, but USA Gymnastics is the largest national governing body for gymnastics. And they're the entity that determines the US national team every year. Then finally, we use the rules that they make. I can't get the camera to focus. It's called the Excel program, okay? And it kind of means accelerated because what we do is we kind of try to cut corners in gymnastics to do things that you can't do in the other type of programs, which are called junior elite or the developmental programs. Okay, so the Excel program. This book that you can't see because it's out of focus, this is called the Excel Code of Points. So the Federation, the FIG, creates a code of points that's essentially the encyclopedia of all gymnastics. And then the Excel Code of Points is a modification of that to create a rule system for different styles of gymnastics, essentially. Code of Points. This is the encyclopedia. In this book, they have every single rule that pertains to the Excel program, which is the rules we use for our X League, as well as an entire list with pictures and descriptions of every single gymnastic skill that exists. And if you're wondering why gymnastic skills are named crazy things like Shaposhnikova and Maloney, okay, it's because if you are a gymnast that successfully competes a skill for the first time at an international level competition, they name the skill after you. So that's why gymnastics names are called Tkachevs and Fedorchenkos and Tong Feis and all Sukaharas and stuff like that. So what the gymnasts are going to do, I have these little cheat sheets, and your coaches have these cheat sheets too, if you ever want to look at them. Okay. On every level, every event except for vault, there are what's called 4 special requirements that the gymnast has to meet, and they have to do a certain number of skills. So all the skills in gymnastics are rated based on their difficulty by a letter of the alphabet, A being the easiest, all the way up to I being the hardest. And the value of each skill goes up. So an A is worth 1/10 of a point, and I is worth 9/10 of a point. And if you're wondering why you don't see perfect 10s anymore when you watch gymnastics on TV, is because that doesn't exist anymore other than for like women's kids gymnastics, because they wanted to reward gymnasts for doing more difficult routines. So now scores are calculated based on the quality of the performance and how difficult what you're doing is. Okay. At the Excel program, like I said, there's 4 requirements and a minimum number of skills you have to do on every event. So for example, at bronze, they have to do 4 skills every routine. At silver, they have to do 5 skills. And at gold, they have to do 6 skills. And the skills all have to come from the code of points. You can't like make something up and count it. It has to be in the code of points. In addition to that, they'll tell you what value skill you have to do. So at each level, they're only required to do A value skills. No one's required to do a B value skill or higher. But if a gymnast was to do a B value skill and allowed to do it, it would count as one of their A's. So it means A or higher if that's the requirement. And then the 4 special requirements are basically the types of skills they have to do. So I'm looking at bronze bars. So for example, they have to do something called a cast, where they're in a support with their arms, they swing their body and they lift their body completely off the bar. So the only thing touching the bar is their hands. They have to do a skill like that. They have to do what's called a 360 circling skill. So meaning their body has to do a 360-degree rotation around the bar. So what your gymnasts do at the bronze level is called a back hip circle. And they have to do a dismount. They have to do a skill from the book that gets them off of the bar. That's why some gymnasts might do like a squat on, where they put their feet on the bar and then jump down. That's an official skill. Each one of those special requirements is worth 5/10 of a point. So if a gymnast performs the number of skills they need and all the special requirements, they start at a 10.0. That's the start value, the highest score they can get. And then a judge will subtract from that start value for every error. So for example, if a gymnast is supposed to keep their arm totally straight and they bend it, they will deduct from that 10.0. And the deductions are in small, medium, and large categories. So if an arm is supposed to be straight and it bends a little, they will subtract 1/10 of a point. If it bends a medium amount, they'll subtract 2/10 of a point. If it bends a lot, they'll subtract 3/10 of a point. And then the largest deduction you can get is a fall. A fall is 5/10 of a point, and they cannot receive credit for the skill they fell on. So if they do a back hip circle and don't make it and they fall off the bar, they have to get up and redo the back hip circle to get credit for the skill. Okay. If a gymnast was to fall performing a skill or miss a requirement, that's why you would see start values at a 9.5 or a 9.0 or so on, because if they're missing that requirement, it'll automatically subtract 0.5 of a point from their start value. And if they're missing a skill, it'll subtract the value of the skill. So if they're required to do an A and they're missing one A, it'll subtract another 1/10 of a point. So let's say a gymnast is doing their 4 skills and they fall on one, so they don't get credit for it, and they don't get credit for their special requirement. It'll be a 9.4 start value automatically. And then the judges will take all of the error deductions off of that, whether it be small, medium, large, and so on. And then the judges have categories of deductions they can take. So it could be angle deductions. It can be form-based, like if your knees are supposed to be straight and they're bent. It could be based on position. How good is your position? And then in women's gymnastics, because there's a dance element to it, that artistry, I make a joke, but the category is essentially called feet, face, and arms. They can deduct if they don't like your feet, face, and arms. And so what that means doesn't mean like if they're making a face or sticking their tongue out, but if their face is like questioning what they're doing or kind of spacing out, if they're not showing this good chin up presentation, the judge can deduct for that. The foot means like the angles of their feet, you know, what is the position their feet in, they can deduct for that. And then the final category is pretty subjective. A judge is allowed to take up to like 3 to 9/10 off just for personal choice. Mainly because
This is so hard.
yes,
I've never seen it.
so the judge's main job is to rank the gymnasts, right? The number itself is actually really meaningless. So we don't want gymnasts focusing on the score because judging is human and subjective. So it can be inconsistent from judge to judge, from event to event, from meet to meet. It's totally subjective, right? I could judge someone a 5 and they could win first place. That's the best routine of the day. They got a 5. They're a winner, right? They should be proud of that. So part of that is in order to rank the routines where they think it's best to worst, they have that subjective thing that's allowed. In men's gymnastics, they don't allow that. You can only deduct based on the rules. You can't just like make up deductions just because. So like as a judge and a coach, when I judge men's gymnastics, I'm like, well, I didn't like that as a coach. It looked uglier, but there's nothing in the rules that state I can deduct because of my opinion. So he scored higher. So yeah. So it is a tough job. What a judge has to do is they have to be watching the routine live. They have to record the skills that are performed. Then they have to calculate the start value. And while they're recording the skills, they also have to record the deductions. So they'll use what's called script. You actually have to learn like a separate written language of symbols, which if anyone wants to be a judge, let me know. I highly encourage parents to become certified judges. It's really cool. It's not as hard as you think, but it would be really cool. So
do they know what is coming? I mean, I'm just wondering, their team has older, right? Some
Yeah.
kids are first one, doesn't matter if they're first one or last one, because they know what is coming.
So
They judge things differently.
they can predict it, but no, the judge has to judge what they see. So the question was, does the judge know what the routine is? The answer is technically no. So what they're doing is they're going to watch the gymnast and they're going to write up symbols of what they did with deductions underneath it as the routine goes on. And then the routine ends and they have to look at the symbols to calculate, did they hit the requirements? What skills did they do? What is their start value? And then they have to add up their deductions to determine the final score.
My question is, does it matter if your kid is the first one in the row or third
Oh.
one or last one? Because I think by the 5th one, probably judge know what exactly they're doing. And
Yeah.
I guess it's still very individual because their routine on that.
Yeah. So the question was, does it matter where in their order did they compete? The answer is no. What happens is as judges go on in the meet, they tend to be really like strict early on, like first thing in the morning. And then as the day goes on, they tend to be more lenient. They get more tired or they notice, wow, you know, this routine was better. I have to make sure it has a higher score. So they're ranked properly. But the important thing is I will say the judges will be consistent with themselves. So the bar judge will make sure the gymnasts are ranked properly on bars. You know, she won't like be totally inconsistent from one gymnast to another in that session on bars. Again, as a nationally certified judge, I am not very fond of judges because they tend to have a weird seniority complex and they tend to be very inconsistent. And I was this sounds really weird to say out loud, but I was a very good judge. And so it irritates me when judges are really bad and I would disagree with them, but it is not in my power to decide the final score. It is in the coach's power to inquire about the start value. So if a gymnast started at a 9.5 and the coach disagrees, it should be a 10, and you have video proof that it should be a 10, you can try to get that changed. So
start point is given after your routine, right?
correct.
Okay, you don't
So-
start from, oh, I think she's a 9.5,
Nope.
Okay.
You watch the whole routine,
and then you give.
and
after
based
that, and
on
then
what
you're
you
done.
saw, you calculate the start value, and then based on the errors, you subtract from the start value to come up with the final score.
I have one question. You know, on the part that's kind of subjective, and let's say, you know, as a judge, you watch four routines, and you're like, oh, I gotta make sure that I rank them correctly. But if the scores are coming out as the person finishes, so if the first person was stellar, then how does that play in? Like they stellar and they gave them a low personal likeness, then what happens when the fifth gymnast comes and they're not as stellar?
Yeah,
see what I'm
so
saying?
a judge has to try to remember all the routines throughout the session and make sure it's consistent. Again, I overblew the subjective part of it. It's not actually as subjective as I was saying. It's really rule based. That's very little part of it. But yeah, they have to, again, my whole reasoning is they will rank the gymnast properly. Don't worry about what the number itself is.
Right. Make sure the kids are growing in the right way.
Yeah.
Not Look at the competition.
Exactly. Focus on their effort. Are they enjoying their time? Are they, demonstrating good team spirit? Are they progressing overall? Because again, at one meet, they might do better and score really low. And at another meet, they might do worse and score higher just because that's how the judges interpreted the rules. But they'll be ranked correctly. Fun, right?
Yes, the more you.
I'm
say,
not,
the
I'm not
more-
advocating. So this is why I say parents, if you want to get into judging, please become a judge because you'll probably care a lot about doing a good job. And they do care a lot as well.
So you need to be a gymnast to be a judge?
Nope.
It's like, I can't jump, so I can judge somebody.
No, I really think, parents becoming judges because their kids in gymnastics is really good because you are going to be less subjective and you're probably going to be more fair because you don't have a particular thing from gymnastics experience that you liked it done, and the other thing is the rules change every 4 years. And so if you've been judging for 50 years, you might mix up rule systems that you used to do versus what's allowed now. And that happens. Human error is fine. The judges are very polite. So, that's happened to me many times where, no, that's wrong. They're like, no, it's a rule. And I'm like, no, it was a rule in 2010. It is not a rule now. And they're like, oh, you're right. So it's important for the coaches to know the rules also. But if you're coming in with fresh eyes, you might be really good at just, if you're good at studying and memorizing rules or being resourceful. So like, I don't memorize rules. I just know how to find them in the book when I need to. Then you can be a really good judge.
It's a challenge.
Do it. Yeah.
You gotta study gymnastics and today.
And then you can be hired to judge the meet your kid is in, and then you're out on the floor and you get to watch it while you're judging. So that's my judging. Again, we're a little past time, so if anyone wants to leave, feel free, but I'll just hang out in case anything else comes up. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sing this. Yeah, take the challenge, right?
Yeah, we do have a gymnast that's on our USA Gymnastics Diamond level team. Her mother's a judge and she wasn't a gymnast growing up. She's a really good judge. She's been doing it for multiple years now since her gymnast was really little. She is not allowed to judge her own daughter, so she's not allowed to be assigned to a competition that she's affiliated with, so anything extreme altitude is that she's technically not allowed to be assigned to, but there's so many competitions, it's fine. And in the X League, we don't care about that. We trust people to be, fair. If anything, it's worse to assign me on teams I'm affiliated with because I'll know their errors ahead of time and I'll probably deduct more.
They messed up her name and then somebody was going ahead of her, but then they put her name.
Oh, yes.
We did, and I'm just like, and then she was going later on. So I was going and then talking to somebody, and then they went and then talked to judges.
Yep.
But then I saw it and then I noticed it, and if I was not noticing it, then that was
Yeah.
wrong.
So-
The coach will get, maybe the coach could have, they probably.
So hopefully the coach will catch it. So she was mentioning like, basically a score for a gymnast that wasn't her daughter was put in for her daughter, which basically just means on the iPad scoring system, the judge just clicked the wrong kid and put the score in for them by accident. In meets, there's actually a score verification process. So there actually is someone running the scoring system that will double check a second system for errors. So like the judge will input it digitally, but then they'll also write it on a piece of paper, and that paper will go to the scoring table, and the scorer has to look on the computer system and make sure it matches the paper. So if it was like, if Kimia got a 9, but on the piece of paper it says Susie, they would be like, that doesn't make any sense. So, and then they go seek out the judge, and the judge has all handwritten stuff. They're required to have the handwritten notes to be able to submit it in case there's any issue. So it is catched pretty often, but if you see it, bring it up.
They can understand it, so.
Yeah.
Different language.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Garrison.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, a lot of times, I'm just like there and then the judge